Maybe you clicked here out of curiosity, or maybe, without realizing it, you were looking for a quiet corner where words arrive slowly and even the silence has something to say. I wrote this story with care, stitching together memories, little hurts, and discoveries, hoping that, at some point, you might see yourself in it. If that happens, even just for a moment, stay. Listen for as long as you like, and if you feel like leaving a small sign that you were here, a simple hi in the comments, or a quiet like, means more than you know. The late summer sun was sliding behind the Oregon pines as I turned my car into the familiar driveway of the house where I grew up. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, pressed her nose against the window, her eyes wide with wonder. "Grandma and Grandpa's house," she squealed. I smiled, though a pang of old memories tugged at me. It had been years since I stayed here for more than a quick visit. This old house had watched me grow up, heard every argument, and seen every tear I swore I'd never shed again. But I wanted Lily to know her grandparents, to feel that she had a bigger family than just the two of us. When I opened the door, the smell of cinnamon and cedar hit me first. My mother, Margaret, was there, smiling like nothing had ever happened. She wrapped her arms around me tightly, the kind of hug that made you wonder if it was love or performance. "Stay for a while, sweetheart," she said warmly. "This house has missed the sound of children's laughter." My father, George, shuffled in from the living room, giving Lily a gentle pat on the head. He wasn't a man of many words, but the small smile he offered almost made me believe things could be different now. As we unpacked, I let myself relax. Maybe they had changed. Maybe the harsh words and cold shoulders of the past were just that. The past. I even sent a text to my best friend in Portland. Maybe this visit will be good for Lily. Maybe for me too. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in the guest room filled with old family photos, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the fridge. I was about to head back up when I froze. From the living room, I heard voices, hushed, sharp. My parents. "She's here with the kid again," my mother whispered. My father sighed. "I know, just be patient. We can handle it." Then came the words that made my stomach drop. "That little girl is so annoying." I gripped the banister, heart pounding, realizing that maybe nothing had changed at all. Cliffhanger. I held my breath in the dark hallway, wondering what other truths were being whispered in the house I once called home. The next morning, the kitchen was filled with the warm scent of maple syrup and fried eggs. Sunlight spilled across the table where my daughter Lily perched on a high chair, swinging her legs happily. For a moment, the house almost felt like the safe haven I wanted it to be. During breakfast, Lily launched into a bubbly story about her best friend at school, the art project they'd made together, and how she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. "And then we made a clay cat, but its tail fell off," she giggled, her voice echoing through the cozy kitchen. I smiled, but across the table my father's jaw tightened. He set his coffee cup down with a sharp clink. "Lily," he said, his voice cold. "Be quiet for a minute. Let the adults talk." Her little face froze, the light in her eyes dimming. I felt my stomach twist. "Dad, she's just—" I started, but he was already turning to my mother, launching into a conversation about property taxes, like my daughter didn't exist. I forced a smile at Lily, gently squeezing her hand under the table. "They're just tired," I told myself. "It's been years. Maybe they're just adjusting." But as the day went on, I began noticing more of the same. A subtle sigh from my father whenever Lily asked a question. A glance from my mother when Lily laughed too loudly at the cartoons. It was like I had brought a storm cloud into their perfectly controlled little world. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I went downstairs for tea. On my way back up, the faint murmur of voices drifted from the living room again. I paused, just out of sight. "She's exactly like her mother was," my mom whispered. George's voice was lower, harder to catch. "Margaret, she's just a kid." "But you remember, don't you?" She snapped quietly. "Always loud, always needing something. I swear, it's like watching that same nuisance grow all over again." I stood frozen in the hallway, my chest tight. Memories I had buried for years clawed their way up. Those dinners where I sat silent as my parents talked over me. Those times I was scolded for laughing, for existing too much. I had always felt like a burden in this house, and now my little girl was carrying that same weight. Later, when I tucked Lily in, she turned to me, her small voice trembling in the dark. "Mom, why doesn't Grandpa like me?" I swallowed hard, forcing a soft smile even as my heart cracked. Cliffhanger. I kissed her forehead, but inside, I knew something had to change, or history would repeat itself. From that night on, I started paying closer attention. The small details that I once brushed off began to form a pattern I couldn't ignore. That Saturday morning, my mother called out from the porch, "Lily, come here and sweep the walkway. It's a mess with all these leaves." Lily blinked, surprised, broom in hand. She hesitated for a second before looking at me. I nodded gently, and she shuffled outside. Not 5 minutes later, my aunt's son, Ethan, a boy about Lily's age, came running through the yard, laughing and tossing a football in the air. "Oh, Ethan, sweetheart, don't trip on the steps," Mom called out, her voice filled with warmth. He ran right past Lily, scattering the leaves she had just swept, and she froze, gripping the broom tighter. The sharp sting of recognition hit me. I had lived this exact scene decades ago. Me doing chores while my cousin played freely, everyone smiling at him while I became invisible. Later that afternoon, we went to the ice cream parlor downtown, Mom's idea. I watched as she ordered cones for herself, Dad, and Ethan. She didn't even glance at Lily. I cleared my throat. "Mom, can you add one for Lily?" She paused, eyebrows knitting like I had just reminded her of an afterthought. "Oh, right, sure." Lily forced a smile, but I could see her eyes drop to the floor, her small fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. The air in my chest felt heavy, sticky, like molasses. That night, while Lily drew quietly in the guest room, I sat in the dark living room, letting the memories wash over me. The birthday parties I was never invited to. The times I heard, "Why can't you be like your cousin?" The walls of this house weren't just wood and plaster. They were soaked with years of quiet rejection. I pulled out my phone and began typing notes. Every cold glance, every slight, every time Lily was treated as less. If history was repeating, I wouldn't let it go unrecorded this time. I got up to grab water in the kitchen and froze in the doorway. My father stood by the counter, holding a framed photo of my little family. Me, my husband, and Lily, taken at a park last summer. He shook his head slowly, not knowing I was there. "She never should have been born," he muttered, voice heavy with regret. The words sliced through me, colder than the night air spilling from the open fridge. Cliffhanger. I stepped back into the shadows, my pulse racing, realizing my daughter was reliving my worst nightmare, and I had to do something before it broke her. The rain had been coming down all afternoon, drumming softly against the old house like a steady heartbeat. Lily was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, coloring quietly while I scrolled through my phone on the couch. Dad was watching the news, volume too loud, While Mom bustled in the kitchen, everything felt deceptively calm, like the house itself was holding its breath. Then it happened. Lily reached for her water on the coffee table, her small hands trembling just slightly. The glass tipped over, water spilling across the rug and onto Dad's slippers. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough. He shot up from his recliner, face red and twisted. "God, you're such a nuisance! Can't you do anything right?" Before I could move, his hand cracked across her cheek. The sound was sharp, like a snapped branch. Time stopped. I saw Lily freeze in shock, her wide eyes filling with tears. My ears rang, and suddenly, I wasn't in that living room anymore. I was 7 years old, standing in the same spot, the same sting on my face, the same feeling of being unwanted. "Get out! Out! I don't want to see your face!" Dad bellowed, pointing toward the back porch. Lily's small body shook as sobs broke free. I rushed forward, pulling her into my arms. "Shh! I've got you, baby. I've got you." Her tears soaked into my shirt, and my heart shattered. But behind the pain, something else surged. Fury. I looked up at my father, who had already turned back to the TV as if nothing had happened. My mother stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, lips pressed tight, pretending the scene wasn't real. The smell of rain, the muted light through the windows, the cold water on the floor. Everything felt etched into my mind like a warning. I scanned the room slowly, my jaw tight. The walls that had witnessed my pain were now watching my daughters. Not again, I thought. Not to her. Never again. I held Lily closer, my voice calm, but trembling inside. "Sweetheart, we're leaving. Right now." But in my chest, another voice whispered, firm, steady, and unfamiliar in its strength. "This time, I won't just walk away. This time, I will make it different." Cliffhanger. I glanced around the house one last time, the storm outside matching the storm inside me, and realized this wasn't just an exit. It was the beginning of something much bigger. That night, the storm had quieted, but inside me, a different storm raged. I lay in the guest room bed, Lily curled tightly against me, her small fingers gripping my shirt, even in sleep. Her soft hiccups from earlier still echoed in my ears. I stared at the ceiling, the faint hum of the old fan filling the silence. No screaming, no begging, no dramatic exit. This time, my departure would be cold and unforgettable. I mentally mapped out every step. Pack only what mattered: our clothes, Lily's favorite stuffed fox, my laptop. Leave behind every gift my parents had ever forced on me. The quilt Mom guilted me into taking, the family photo frames I never wanted, even the heavy casserole dish she said I'd need to host people someday. Write a letter, not an apology, not a plea, a ledger of every emotional debt they owed me. I imagined the lines. "You taught me I was a burden before I learned my own name. You hit my child today. That is the last memory you will ever have of her in this house." I wanted my words to land not like a scream, but like a quiet knife they'd never pull out. Careful not to wake Lily, I slipped from bed and began to quietly gather our things. The soft rustle of clothes in the suitcase felt liberating. When I knelt to pick up Lily's sneakers, my hand brushed against the bottom drawer of the dresser. Something felt off, like the corner of a folder wedged in a place it didn't belong. Curiosity overpowered caution. I pulled the drawer open further. There, amid some old sweaters and loose socks, lay a thick envelope. I slid it out and froze when I read the label. Walter H., Retirement Fund and Investment Documents. I blinked, confused. Why were my father's retirement papers stuffed into a drawer in my room? For a moment, I just stared at it, the weight of possibilities pressing down on me. This wasn't just money. It was leverage. Something I never thought I'd have in this house. I slowly tucked the envelope into my duffel bag. Not to steal, but to decide later what justice would look like. I zipped the bag silently and glanced at the sleeping figure of my daughter. They will remember this night, I thought, even if I never say a word. Cliffhanger. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, my fingers brushing against the edge of that envelope, knowing the next move could change everything. The house was still wrapped in darkness when I slipped out of bed. Only the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of rain outside kept me company. I gently nudged Lily awake. She blinked sleepily, then seemed to understand without a word. Together, we moved like shadows, folding clothes, tucking her stuffed fox into the bag, slipping shoes on without a sound. I'd done this before as a child, sneaking out of rooms to avoid my parents' anger. But this time, it was me choosing to disappear. I picked up my father's retirement envelope from the nightstand, intending to put it back into his office drawer. But in my exhaustion, my hand trembled. The papers slid from my fingers, scattering across the floor. The window was cracked open, and a gust of damp air swept through. Raindrops splattered across the documents, blurring numbers and smudging ink. I froze. I could almost hear his voice already. Irresponsible, careless, always ruining things. I swallowed hard, gathered the wet papers, and slipped them into a separate folder, knowing this accident was going to leave a mark, one that would spiral into trouble later. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled faintly of last night's burnt coffee. I set the letter on the counter, its words sharp and quiet. Thank you for reminding me that my childhood was never my fault. Here is the debt ledger. 7 years of love, paid by my daughter in your stead. Paid in full. No drama, no signature, just closure. I held Lily's hand as we slipped into the cool night air, bags over our shoulders. The rain was steady but gentle, like the sky had been waiting to wash us clean. The car door clicked shut softly. I started the engine and eased down the narrow lane that led away from the house where I grew up, and died a little, so many times. As the streetlights thinned and the night swallowed us, Lily broke the silence. Mom, are we ever coming back here? Her small voice, fragile and trembling, cut deeper than anything my parents had said. I tightened my grip on the wheel, eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. Cliffhanger. I didn't answer, but in that moment, I knew. The next time we returned, it wouldn't be as family, it would be as strangers. The little house I rented wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, creaky wooden floors, and a kitchen window that overlooked a modest garden. But to me and Lily, it felt like the first real home we'd ever had. There were no echoes of shouting here, no footsteps stomping down the hall, just the soft hum of the fridge and the laughter of my daughter, finally free to exist without fear. Mornings became our sanctuary. We'd sit on the porch with cereal and warm mugs of cocoa, watching sparrows hop along the fence. Lily would lean against me and whisper, "It's so quiet, Mom. I like it." Money was tight, painfully so. I took on late-night freelance projects, data entry, copywriting, anything that would pay, while Lily slept. During the day, I homeschooled her on weekends and let her explore the library after school. For the first time in years, my life was mine to live. Days passed, then weeks. Not a single phone call from my parents. Instead, a few texts trickled in. "So, you're just going to abandon your family? You think you're better than us now?" I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen, then locked my phone without replying. Silence was my new armor. Then, one afternoon, the mailman knocked. Special delivery for you, he said, handing me a slightly warped brown envelope. My stomach dropped when I saw the sender's address, my parents' house. The envelope was water-stained, the ink smeared as if it had survived a storm. I tore it open and felt my pulse quicken. Inside was the retirement file, the very one that had slipped from my hands that rainy night. The pages were wrinkled, streaked with faded numbers, and scrawled across the top in my father's handwriting was a single line. "Look what you did!" Cliffhanger. I stood in my quiet little kitchen, envelope trembling in my hands, and realized this wasn't over. My parents weren't done with me. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done with them either. It started with a call from Mrs. Harper, our old neighbor. She had always been kind to me, slipping cookies over the fence when I was a lonely kid. "Sweetheart, I don't want to get in the middle of anything," she said, her voice low. "But your parents, they've been in a mess lately." Apparently, after I left, chaos bloomed inside that old house. My father discovered his retirement file was water damaged beyond recognition. The bank and the state office demanded endless forms, identification checks, and notarized letters to restore his benefits. He blamed my mother blamed him, and soon the shouting that had once been aimed at me now turned inward. Mrs. Harper whispered, "I think they expected you to come running back to fix everything, but you didn't." I hung up, staring out the window of my small kitchen. Silence had become my sharpest weapon, and I hadn't even raised my voice. Days turned into weeks, and I heard more bits and pieces. My father had snapped at my aunt during Sunday dinner. My mother cried in the driveway when the insurance office mailed back another rejection. They rarely left the house, afraid neighbors might notice their growing embarrassment. And through it all, I said nothing. Not a text, not a visit. Because deep down, I knew this. They were finally feeling a fraction of the weight I'd carried my whole life. Then, one quiet Thursday afternoon, I was at the grocery store with Lily. We were debating whether to get chocolate or vanilla ice cream when I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. I turned, and there they were. My parents, standing in the next checkout line, both holding a half-empty cart. My mother's eyes flicked to me, wide and raw. My father froze, his jaw tight, as if the fluorescent lights had just exposed every crack in his pride. Cliffhanger. For a heartbeat, the world went silent except for the beep of the scanner. Then he took a step toward me. They stood there, only a few feet away from me, but the distance between us was like an ocean. They both looked visibly older, backs slightly hunched, hair streaked with gray, and eyes filled with anger, fatigue, and a little regret. Lily huddled close behind me, her little hands clutching the hem of my shirt. She didn't say a word, but the way she avoided looking at her grandparents said it all. My mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "You go home. We can talk again." The words were lost amid the sound of the scanner and the cheap supermarket music. I looked at her for a long time. In that moment, my whole childhood came rushing back. The quiet meals, the unreasonable scolding, and my daughter's wet eyes in the rainy night. I didn't feel hatred, only emptiness and peace. Without a word of reproach, I took a white envelope from my bag and placed it on the counter between us. On it was only one handwritten line. "Final debt sheet, paid in full." My mother was startled, her lips trembling but unable to say a word. My father stood still, his hands gripping the cart handles so tightly, his knuckles were white. I turned my back, took my child, and walked away without looking back. Behind me, the supermarket was bustling again. But in that moment, their world was plunged into absolute silence. Cliffhanger. The automatic door closed behind me, leaving them standing frozen in the cold light, like two statues trapped in their own past. As the supermarket door closed behind me, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the afternoon sun blew through my hair. The golden sunset spread across the asphalt road, reflecting off the car windows, making the whole world glow with a warm color. Lily walked beside me, her tiny hand holding mine. She looked up, her eyes clear, no longer afraid. "Mom, are we free now?" I paused for a second, looked at my son, and then nodded. "Yes, we are free, my love." In that moment, a wave of relief washed over me. I realized I no longer felt anger or resentment. There was only pure peace, something I had been searching for all these years. Since then, my life with my son has completely changed. We learned to enjoy quiet mornings, meals filled with laughter, and afternoons walking hand in hand in the park near our house. Every day, I taught my son how to bake, grow flowers, and write a diary about the little things that made him happy. My parents still live in the old house where I used to belong, now only an echo of the past. Those walls will remind them of the void they created, and I walked out and never came back. Conclude. I choose peace over hatred. They will be left with empty memories. As for me and my child, we will start a new life